Well, hey, here we are back for our next little session, I guess, here on YouTube. I don't know, I might even do a similar test of this on Facebook Live again later and see what the results are. I don't know, maybe not, but I know I'm putting this on YouTube for sure. So I've been hearing a lot recently about men, especially, and the lack of men that commit to church life, to I won't say to a spiritual life, because I think there's a lot of, for the most part, I'm going to say basically every man chooses some form of spiritual life or lack thereof. A lot of men, I think, would claim to be Christian, but don't darken the doors of church. The women that attend that are married and their husbands don't come, I guess the term that they use is church widows, right? That's disturbing. That's troubling. And in my time in ministry, don't go crazy, okay? Don't go crazy. But the greatest honor that I had was to look out into a crowd and to see men that chose to come, even at times when their wives didn't. That was a big deal. That was a big deal. So I'm going to start specifically challenging men. I always kind of have, but I'm going to get in your kitchen, okay? Because I think I know how you think. I think I know more how you think than I do how the ladies think. But that doesn't mean that this is not for the ladies that listen. There's probably more of those than there are men. But I'm not going to back down from the male mentality. I have a good little bit of that myself. Get through the pride screen and get through our rock hard skulls, and we can get something done. So bear with me. For many, many years, most all of my pre-Christian life and even most of my Christian life, even in my messages that I've prepared, it's much easier to prepare a message based on pulling a line of scripture out here and there. And not out of context. I've never been guilty of that on purpose. But my current study, I stepped away from everything for a while, and my current studies have more to do with reading the documents, the Gospels, like it was a parchment that was handed to me to read. I don't want to read titles of chapters. I don't want to read titles inside those chapters. Original scripture didn't have any of that. It didn't even have punctuation. So we see it much differently now. And I think we've even been taught to look at it that way. If you want to read about the transfiguration, well, just find where it says the transfiguration and start reading. And in some aspects, that's okay, but not often. It's used the vast majority of the time, and I think it's wrong. I don't think that we get the full understanding of why it was written. Some of this was written where it was event by event the same day, and sometimes it wasn't. And we can't miss that, okay? So today I'm going to be in the 9th chapter of Luke. Now, I'm not going to just do scripture today. I'm going to do scripture, and then I'm going to do an application story, true story, okay, to help us apply it to today and how this affects us, all right? Now, as I studied the 9th chapter of Luke, as I'm studying the book of Luke, I was reading the 9th chapter. And remember, there wouldn't have been chapter 9, okay? But as we have it labeled, the 9th chapter, Jesus was a bad dude. And I don't mean bad like, gunslinger dude. Hey, he did not water down anything. And if you just want to sit down and read a chapter, read the entire chapter. Read chapter 9 of Luke. That's a challenge. Read the chapter and slow down and read what it says, and read what walking with Jesus would have been like. I guarantee you it wasn't watered down. I guarantee you It was, well, intimidating. Okay, intimidating. I'm going to cover just a little bit of that until we get to the whole lesson. Now, in the beginning, Jesus sends out the 12 disciples. And get this, I don't think that we get this enough. He sent them into these towns. And you think, well, Jesus was like, well, just stay there until they listen to you, right? Stay there until, that's what we feel like. Christians are soft and watered down. And it's because Jesus was like, just love everybody, right? I mean, this was the tone. Well, if that's the case, then why would he say, if a town refuses to welcome you, shake the dust from your feet and leave to show that you have abandoned those people to their fate? Leave. Bless the house you stay in, but if it proves to be an unworthy home, take your blessing back. Get the dust off of your sandals and leave them to their own fate. Does that sound watered down to you? That's just the beginning, right? There are so many things in there. How Jesus predicts his own death, the transfiguration, right? Where he goes up with Peter and John and onto the mountain, and he sees Elijah and Moses, and they're covered in a cloud. And how did that affect them? They didn't tell anyone at the time what they had seen, because it gripped them. They were scared. They were scared. Yeah, I think I would be too. And so right after that, Scripture says, keep reading it, the next day, after Peter and John have been on the mountain with Jesus, the next day, a man in the crowd called out to Jesus to heal his son, his only child. And now what is Jesus? And he says, your disciples haven't been able to do it. Okay, that's the man's response. And do you know what Jesus' response is? Do you know what he said just a little bit ago, right? About knock the dust off your sandals, leave them to their own fate. Okay, here's what he says. You faithless and corrupt people, how long must I be with you and put up with you? Do you see? Okay. Now, how does that affect the disciples? How does that affect these people? They were in awe because he healed the boy. But while all these people were milling around and marveling at what Jesus did, he told the disciples that they must remember, because the Son of Man will be betrayed into the hands of enemies. But get this, they didn't know what he meant. Its significance was hidden for them, so they couldn't understand it. And what was their relationship? And they were afraid to ask him about it. They were afraid to ask him about it. Is that the Jesus that you hear about a lot? That he's doing all these things, he has all this stuff going on, and that even his disciples, when they don't get it, they're afraid to ask him. That is how intimidating and awesome and awe-inspiring he was. Why don't we hear more about that? I think men like that sort of thing. I mean, that's the John Wayne, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Clint Eastwood kind of guy, right? Not the sappy little softy that you hear about so much off in the corner and you see portrayed on TV when you see Christians portrayed. You don't see that one. You don't see that one, and that's not right. That's one of the reasons why men don't want to do church. It's too soft. It's too frilly. It's too feminized. He wasn't. What's wrong with us? Why don't we talk about this? So Jesus knew their thoughts, and he taught them a lesson, right? But so on the heels of all of that, okay, I'm going to send you out. Be shrewd, right? I'm giving you take a sword. I'm giving you all these things. Let's do this. And the transfiguration, he had all of those things going. He heals. He says, why? How long am I going to have to keep doing this? You people just don't get it. They're afraid to ask him about it. On the heels of all of that, as the time drew near for him to ascend to heaven, Jesus resolutely set out for Jerusalem, okay, the capital. So he's headed to Jerusalem now. He sent messengers ahead to Samaria, to a Samaritan village, to prepare for his arrival. So he sends some people ahead, says, because there were obviously hundreds, if not thousands, of people that were following him. So set out, get them ready. But the people of the village did not welcome Jesus because he was on his way to Jerusalem. Now that takes a little longer to explain. I don't want to waste a lot of time talking about that today. But basically, Samaritans were half Jews, right? What was the Cher song in the 70s? Half breed, right? If you remember, well, if you're that old, but half breed. They weren't true. They had intermarried when the Israelites had been conquered at one point in history, and some of the tribes, and they lived in the mountains above Jerusalem, and they looked down, and so that's why there's the whole Samaritan thing. Pure Jews didn't like Samaritans because they weren't pure Jewish people, and they didn't worship the same way. So he's going into this village, and they don't like it because he's headed to Jerusalem. They don't like that, okay? So they tell him, we don't want you because of where you're going. When James and John, the brothers, saw this, they said to Jesus, now tell me they're not trying to get some brownie points with the big guy this way, right? These are brownie point statements. Don't tell me you haven't had them. You've had them. Lord, should we call down fire from heaven to burn them up? Right? Well, earn a few points. Let's do this. Let's get rid of them. The whole Sodom and Gomorrah thing. These people don't want to see you. Well, we'll teach them. What was Jesus' answer? Jesus turned and rebuked them. Jesus turned and rebuked them. So they went on to another village. Now, I don't want to overlook that because I'm going to ask you, specifically men, but ladies also, do you think that Jesus is just hanging out, crying in the corner, hoping that you figure it out at some point in time? Do you really think that? Because if you do, dude, you need just read the 9th chapter of Luke. Just start at the beginning and read the chapter and tell me what kind of a man he was. The people that followed him at times were afraid of him because if they didn't get what he was teaching, he usually had something to say about it. They were intimidated by his presence and by what he could do. Are you? Are you? Do you think that because you choose to stay away, that's just okay with him? If he's asked you to, in some way, to come to him, to listen to him, to find out more about him, like he did the Samaritans, and you refuse, like they did, do you think that he just waits around? Do you think he doesn't notice? Dude, he goes on to another village. He goes on to another village. And you say that's fine, and that's your choice. He allows you that. He allows you that choice. But don't think for a minute that he doesn't notice. And don't think for a minute that that's a good thing for you. Because you do know the difference between the right way and the wrong way, the wide gate and the narrow gate, the way of light and the way of darkness. You can label it 1,000 different ways, but you know, and you know what your choices are doing to you. How important is this? You see, not everybody believed, and not everybody was busting his knuckles. Those people just didn't like the direction that he was headed, so they refused to hear him. Well, maybe you don't like the direction he's headed. Do you think he's waiting on you? Do you think the world revolves around you? Interesting. Here's a true story. A minister friend of mine received a call late one night. I had to write it down so I wouldn't miss the details. He received a call late one night. He had a surgeon who was a friend of his. That night in surgery, they had a young woman that was brought in that had been severely beaten. Okay, about every major bone in her body had been broken. So, in an effort to save her, they cut her rib cage open so that they could massage her heart by hand. But when they got in there, her heart tissue was already mush. As sad as that sounds, that's how she had deteriorated in her own body because of her lifestyle choices. So the surgeon stood after that, washing his hands, and he had tears rolling down his face, thinking of what this young woman's life had come to. And about that time, a nurse came in with a bag, and she poured it out. And it was a bag full of drug paraphernalia that came with this young woman. And about that same time, the doctor noticed a small cut, very small paper cut that he had on his finger, the side of his finger, that he had gotten whenever he went through her rib cage to massage her heart. And he was distraught because he had 2 young children and a wife at home. And now he had exposed himself to contaminated blood. And this friend of mine asked him, is that enough? I mean, it's just a paper cut. Have you exposed yourself to contaminated blood with a simple little cut? Didn't it take something much greater than that? And the man's answer was, no. No, that's all it takes to be contaminated. And maybe I am and maybe I'm not. But that's all it takes. So I wonder about you. And I wonder about me. Pushing him away is a paper cut. Deciding that you know better is a paper cut. Thinking you have all the answers is a paper cut at best. It's an open wound at worst. So what are you going to do? What am I going to do? Are we going to continue to say we know without really knowing and without really studying? I don't know how far these messages are going to go. I have not the slightest idea. But I do know that the Jesus that was real and the Jesus that walked around teaching and talking was a whole lot more intimidating than we make him out to be at times. And I think that's awesome. And I think more men would think so too if you listen. And if you're taught. But you got to show up, guys. You got to listen. I can tell you one thing, I'm never going to sugarcoat it for you because I can't sugarcoat it for myself. I don't want that fluffy stuff. Man, I can go through that all day long. That doesn't do anything for me. I want the real guy. I want to know what he was like. I think we found out a good portion of that. Oh, it's all over. Trust me. It's all over. But man, when I studied that 9th chapter of Luke, come on, man. Come on. He's right there. So I'll go for now. This is long enough. But I want you to do that. I want you to study it. I want you to look. And don't forget to look for the paper cuts. Not to your fingers, but to your soul. Because there's a world out there that's contaminated. And it'll look for every opportunity it can to get into you, and it may already have. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to lead your family? How are you going to lead yourself? Till next time, guys. See you.